I am really happy to be with you on this rainy day, keeping cozy inside with all of you. As some of you may know, my name's Nicole. I also go by Nico, and I'm seeking the nomination for the NDP for the next federal election here in Davenport. And I've started a series of discussions called Davenport Discussions, talking to folks in the riding about issues that we care about. And this is the very first episode, and I'm really excited to have Kaleb Robertson here. I did want to start with, before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge, both Kaleb and I would like to acknowledge that the land we're on here in the Davenport riding is a traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, which is now home as well to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and we'd like to encourage you all to think about the land that you are currently situated on. I'd now like to bring in our special guest, Kaleb. We're going to be talking about something that isn't often talked about. Today is Menstrual Hygiene Day, and we're going to be talking about periods and how they don't just affect women and girls. So, let's add Kaleb into the conversation. Yay! Hi, Kaleb.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm great.
Yeah? You keeping warm?
Yes, I'm in a cozy little basement near Lansdowne in College.
Nice. Not far from me. It's really nice to see you. Kaleb and I have known each other for many, many years in another life in Vancouver, and somehow we've ended up here in the same riding in Davenport.
Yeah, Nico was the way for my friend, a very close friend of mine, to come out.
That's true.
Like, I wanted you to meet somebody special.
That's true. I
Yeah.
forgot about that, actually. Yeah.
So, very happy to support you. Very happy to be here.
Yay, thank you. That's great. Do you want to spend a minute introducing yourself to folks who may not know who you are?
Absolutely. My name is Kaleb, and I also perform as a non-binary drag persona by the name of Fluffy Souffle. Fluffy is mostly right now really working hard on Fan Fluffy's Storytime, which is our drag duo that does story times for kids, and we've been doing it for 5 years. This Pride is our 5-year anniversary, and we've got some very exciting news coming out soon. But right now we're just hustling, doing lots of virtual story times, and I also do workshops as Kaleb and Fluffy, corporate workshops, school workshops, stuff about gender, stuff about performance, stuff about masculinity and femininity, and kind of breaking all that down and encouraging people to find themselves and be who they are. And recently, some of those discussions have come around menstruation and around kind of making that whole industry be a little more inclusive and aware of other people that menstruate.
Yeah, I remember seeing an interview that you did a couple months ago, and I started thinking about it because I, started seeing this literature come up around Menstruation Day, Menstrual Hygiene Day, and recently I started to identify as non-binary. I had top surgery in the fall, and I'm starting to think more about those kinds of traditionally female things like periods and endometriosis, and kind of not seeing myself fit in there anymore, and it being really jarring to kind of see that. And so I started thinking about the interview that you did, and thought it would be great to have you come on and speak about it. So yeah, I'm curious to know why you felt the need to kind of speak out about this particularly.
Well, it's something that is so basic for such a large part of our population. And it's something that people don't really think about as being exclusive until it's brought to their attention. In the same way that most people have no problem with public washrooms. You know which one you go to, you go in, you do your business, you feel comfortable. Whereas for such a huge part of the population, there is so much fear and anxiety and legitimate worry about facing violence, having security called on them, all these kinds of things. And it's not just trans and non-binary people, it's people that are gender non-conforming, it's women that have short hair. It's, it's so much more than just the trans and non-binary community. So in talking about it, it's just kind of allowing everybody to see that there are situations and people out there that this basic physical thing is huge in terms of anxiety and stress. And so just wanting other people to be aware of that and thinking about things like, that trans men can have their periods, and how do you have a pad when you wear boxers? Like little things like that. Or, there's no garbage cans in the stalls of men's rooms. So where do you dispose of things? And all of my feelings about creating inclusive environments, it's never about putting aside women and girls. It's never about, saying, well, they're not as important, or, dismissing anybody. It's always about bringing people in and, just saying, hey, this is happening. Other people do get their periods. And so how can we talk about that? How can we make people feel comfortable? How can we market towards them? Because it's also, if we're talking about capitalism, we're talking about money. Like, don't you want people to feel comfortable buying your product? Don't you want to change the signage from being feminine hygiene to being more inclusive, knowing that other people do experience this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hello to everyone who's joining us. I'm here with Kaleb Robertson, and we're talking about periods and how they don't just affect women and girls. Welcome to those of you who have just joined. I also, more broadly than just periods, I recently saw for the first time in an endometriosis group that I'm in, someone talking about how their son has endometriosis. And I thought it was such a powerful moment for me anyway, to see that, because it's not often, you don't often see that. And actually the kind of response that, that community was giving was super positive. So I just think, you're right. The more that we talk about things and the more that people are aware, it'll get better for folks, hopefully. That's the aim.
And like you said, it's so much more than just periods. It's men who get breast cancer. They're a small population, but they're a part of that population. And so in the medical industry, if you go to a cancer website, often you are greeted with a screen that says men's cancers and women's cancers. Whereas, as I recently supported a non-binary friend going through cervical cancer, as soon as you go to that website for support, you're excluded from that. And you don't feel like that's a space for you. And the medical industry already is a place where trans and non-binary people don't always feel comfortable, don't always feel accepted, don't always feel heard. So a lot of times people will go to emergency care, after putting things off because they don't want to deal with things, knowing that they could go in and face discrimination, they could face being, having the wrong pronouns, having the wrong name. And so people avoid getting medical care. And then that is going to be, terrible in the long run. So we're losing people who should be able to access healthcare. And especially, we are very privileged. We are in Canada. We do know that it's still discriminatory against a lot of members of our Indigenous Black POC community. And so, these conversations are hopefully going to just allow more people access to get what they need to save their bodies and save themselves.
What I think, access to trans healthcare more broadly is something that I feel super passionate about pushing forward. And I feel very privileged in the body that I'm in a white body, living in Toronto, having, I have a trans doctor. I feel very supported, and all of my process actually has been super easy on the medical side. And so it makes me feel not guilty, but just that, we need to make sure that everyone has access to those same kind of services, no matter where they are, and have kind of that same comfort. Mm-hmm. What do we need to do to make that happen?
Well, trans healthcare isn't just about accessing surgeries and things that relate to our transition. So trans healthcare should be everything about our bodies. It should be somebody that looks like a man going in to get their pap smear. It should be somebody that looks like a woman that goes and needs to get, a prostate exam. And so education is going to be huge in regards to doctors, nurses, and emergency care physicians. And, if their primary focus is generally saving your life, it should be, especially in emergency situations. So they might not think, well, this person's pronoun doesn't matter. I just want to stop the bleeding. But if that person feels disrespected, if that person feels anxious and doesn't feel like their identity is being seen, they're less likely to go back and seek help again. So I think education in a broader sense of the healthcare community is huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We did, I'm part of the Ontario NDP LGBTQ committee, and we did a panel last year, which was really great, talking about bringing various folks together, talking about trans healthcare, talking about access and how we could improve access. And I think you're right that it's so much broader than actually accessing the services. And I think in a lot of instances, it does start with education. It does start with, I don't think that there's much education that happens in medical schools, for instance, talking about those kinds of things. So I think that that's something that needs to kind of be pushed forward a little bit more.
And I feel like some people can now wrap their heads around the idea of a trans man and a trans woman. Okay, I get it. This person doesn't feel right in their body. They're going to be the other gender. But then as soon as we get into non-binary, gender non-conforming people, then it's like, oh, well, I don't understand them. And, people kind of throw up their hands and they go, well, how am I supposed to learn all these new pronouns? And you don't have to learn everything. You just have to, work with the person that you're in front of and respect that person. And so making things very personable, which is kind of why I chat about this a lot, is because I'm like, if you've never met a trans person before, like when I do corporate events, I'm like, you're looking at one. So now you know that like this is a trans person. We're people just like everybody else, and we need access to the basic necessities as much as possible. We already know that in terms of violence and discrimination and, housing and jobs, that Black trans women and trans women of color are especially the most, vilified and the most abused and face the most discrimination. So how are we helping them otherwise? If they go to an emergency room, are they going to be mistreated there? And, I know that at this point we've really gone beyond periods, but, it is important because that is a little thing that is so much a part of the bigger medical industry. And it is, a capitalist industry where we need everybody to get what they need, especially in a place like Canada, since we're all like, ooh, well, at least we're not American, like sitting on our high horses. Whereas, we know that Indigenous people will die in a hallway. We know that people face discrimination when they go to emergency rooms. We know that people don't feel heard when they say that they're in pain. And so we are not giving universal health care to everybody. It's not equal. And so menstruating is kind of this thing. And I made this joke. Hi, American. I made this joke about, how I'm not saying that I want, menstrual products to suddenly have like bearded dudes on it and, to suddenly change it from like, here's women's pads and men's pads. Here's man palm.
Blue pads and pink pads.
Like, we just want, easy access and to feel like those things are available to us. We want the shame, because this is something that so many people of our population go through, and it doesn't mean womanhood. There are tons of reasons why cisgendered women and girls don't menstruate. It doesn't make them any less of a woman, just like it doesn't make a trans woman any less of a woman because they don't bleed. It doesn't make me any less of a man because I did menstruate for years as a man.
What did it feel like for you when you had your period, when you're a man and you had a period? What did that feel like for you?
Oh, it's just like you take the already like physical and emotional roller coaster that you're on menstruating, and then you add in shame, you add in embarrassment, you add in, not taking care of yourself, and it just is all so much bigger than it was prior. It's not feeling comfortable going to men's washrooms. I also made a joke about like pretending that you're eating a candy because you're unwrapping like a tampon in the men's room and that kind of thing. So it's another reason why I love single stall gender neutral washrooms, which I wish that those were everywhere, because there is such a euphoria in peeing in a safe space, which is so weird to even think about. But yeah, for me, it was terrible. It just reminded me every month that like my body's betraying me and my body's not what I want it to be. And, I think there's very few women even who are like, yay, my period is here. So it's uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable thing that there's already this divide of men being like, oh, I'm too shy to, or too embarrassed to go buy my wife some tampons. But it's like, let's just erase all that. It's a menstruation. So many people in our population do it. There should be no shame about any of this. And so especially, as from trans and non-binary people, it's just a part of what our bodies do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're exactly right. Somebody's talking about how someone always had the women symbol on their wrappers up until recently and had to take them off. So yeah, I mean, you see this, changing a little slowly?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I haven't really perused the aisles recently. I'm sure that there are still some that say feminine hygiene. And because I also don't want to crush the, I feel like there's a part of like girl power, women's empowerment sometimes in some of these things of like, you can still do all these things, and hey, you can still ride horses on the beach and wearing all white, and it's okay. And yes, you can still do all those things, but also it doesn't have to be so like women focused. They're a medical product. Like they are, like anything else that you need to get at the pharmacy. And yes, some things like razors for men and women and Bic pens for men and women, we made fun of those, because they're ridiculous. So why shouldn't packaging be a little more neutral? And again, I don't mean that we want to exclude anybody. I'm not saying that these now have to be like men's pads that have tools on them and stuff like that, but just some acknowledgement. And it's slowly happening. So there's a new menstrual cup coming out that's going to be a little more gender neutral. There are, as we've seen, there's underwear that's being made now that's specifically targeting a broader range of people. And yeah, just ways that some companies are like, oh, hey, other people menstruate, and they're getting in on it, which, yeah, should be happening. And it shouldn't be happening with somebody having to buy a $40 pair of underwear. Like, it should be happening that's more accessible to people. And hopefully that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And thinking also about accessibility to those items, they're also not very affordable in many instances. I think, there's a lot of work to be done to ensure that everyone has access to that more broadly as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if we can make, pads that go in a thong, we should be able to design things that, are better for all sorts of bodies, because everybody's vulvas are different. Everybody sits differently in their bodies. So yeah, why aren't we just branching out for a wider range of bodies regardless of gender?
I think we have another question here as well. It was answered already. Anyone else have any questions? For those of you who joined, speaking with Kaleb Robertson today, we're talking about periods and how they work with girls and trans healthcare more broadly. If you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. I would like to know, maybe for folks who are listening today, how do you, if there's a takeaway from this, for folks who kind of, want to be supportive and want to make safer spaces for, for trans and non-binary folks. What's some sort of suggestions of things that they can do?
I think one of the things is to help eliminate shame. Never ew something about somebody's body. If you're a gay cis dude and you're dating a trans guy who gets a period, never make him feel shameful about that. Never be like, ew, disgusting. Our bodies do this. And so some bodies are going to be different than ones that maybe you're used to. But, the idea that people are grossed out by menstruation is old-fashioned and it's offensive. And so, if we can eliminate some of that shame in general, that's going to help everybody, not just trans and non-binary people. It's going to help everybody who menstruates.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there is a lot of shame, I think, in general with menstruation, but also a lot of shame in general for trans and non-binary folks who don't necessarily feel so great in their bodies. So any additional shame on top of that is yeah, it's not helpful at all. Yeah.
And as somebody says, talks like this are helping to normalize it and slowly getting out. I mean, the fact that Kane and I did this conversation on a mainstream daytime talk show talking about periods. Yeah, when they put it on Facebook, a lot of people are like, this is disgusting. These people are like, what the fuck is going on here? But at the end of the day, we're still trans and non-binary people who menstruate. So as much as people want to hate on it or think the conversation was disgusting or whatever, think that we're disgusting, we're here. Like, Kane is amazing. And also like the fact that we got to come out and talk about that. And especially, for them being, more in the non-binary and both of us kind of fucking with gender, I think both of our stories were so valid and so important. And yeah, it was amazing to have that opportunity. Everybody at the show was so nice. And, I think it was part of a whole week of talking about menstruation. And then the fact that they did include a topic like ours and really let us go. I thought it was going to be, a 2-minute little, here's 2 minutes to talk about, your trans shit. And it was like, no, they really respected us and gave us a great platform. So very appreciative to them.
Yeah. And it seemed like
to you, of course, for this.
Thank you. Yeah. It seemed like they really, made an effort to really understand. You could tell in the way that the questions were being asked and the fact that you were given the last word to say what you wanted to say. I thought it was quite powerful.
Yeah. If anybody wants to see it, I think scroll back on my feed. It's on there, or in the link in my bio. I've got it in my link tree. And yeah, it was a really nice discussion about menstruation.
Mm-hmm. I realize we're at time now. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Do you want to leave us with a few last words and what's next for you? Anything coming up that we should know about?
Yeah, well, I just want to point out Kane's topic is that now is a time when trans stuff is really coming into the mainstream. And as that happens, as we know, when things become more mainstream, it means that the voices against that really get louder and more aggressive and a little scarier. So as allies to trans and non-binary people, joining discussions like this, putting out comments, if you have the spoons or the ability to kind of put out positive comments when you see stories about topics like this is huge. And, gradually we won't be a Baroness von Sketch episode where they're like, let's put butterflies on it. Oh, we got to make it pink and purple and all those kinds of things. So it's always harder to stand up for yourselves, And so when we have allies who are listening, who are then going to turn to their friend who says a comment like, ooh, like, gross, that vagina's bleeding, ugh. It's like, well, dude, a lot of people are attached to those vaginas who can't really get rid of them or don't want to or whatever the topic is. And so just showing support by being like, dude, don't be an asshole. Like it's those little comments that make you vocally in support of trans and non-binary people, not just saying like, oh, it's the same as being like, you can say you're anti-racist all day, but if you never do a damn thing about it, then you're not. You know, if you're not speaking up against racist behavior, racist words, then you're just sitting back, like patting yourself on the back for nothing. So either speak up, hopefully you do. Hopefully when you see stories like this, you know, give them a like and a thumbs up or whatever you need to do, just because those little things are very important. That public support is huge.
You're right. Public support is huge, and all those little things, you know, put together amount to something big, and that's how change happens. So really important to support trans and non-binary folks when you can. Thank you. You know, this is, you know, I want to try and be the first non-binary MP that Canada's ever had. So that's what I'm for. And, you know, this is one of the issues that I feel super passionate about is, you know, trans healthcare more broadly, and pushing that forward at the federal level, because I think especially things that fall under kind of healthcare are very, you know, depending on the province that you live in, you know, there's a wide disparity of access and information. And so I really think to bring that to the federal level and, you know, and have a plan for the whole country and ensure that folks have access to those same. So,
and it's amazing. And I know that, like the Davenport riding, I know it's going to be a tough battle. And so I will be, you know, supporting you and wishing you all the best. And I hope that if this opportunity doesn't go your way, that you continue to work and fight and find other ways, because I think that your voice is really important, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yay.
Hey, thank you so much for joining today. I really, really appreciate it. Really appreciate your time, Kaleb. Thanks to all of you.
Yeah.
And thank you for being here for the first Davenport Discussions. And I will be chatting with folks in the coming weeks. Probably no one as interesting as Kaleb, and period. But let's see. Thanks, everyone.
Stay safe. Be well.
And